I was the youngest varsity coach in CIF at the time. I had girls that were 18 and 19 years old that I was coaching, like women. And I think it's fair to say that I learned more in those 4 years that I was at Pasadena High School about life, adolescence, what it means to be a role model, a mentor, what it means to be in a position of like not just authority, but in a position of like leading by example. Like the way those girls like hung on to my every word, even though I was so young, was credit and kudos to them, because they were also looking for something. They were also looking for someone to come and speak into their life and walk with them.
Well, I love the San Gabriel Valley.
Welcome to the My SGV podcast.
So I grew up here and I still live in Alhambra.
I was raised in between Temple City and Alhambra.
Eventually resided in South San Gabriel.
Our mission is to capture and share the stories of the people of the San Gabriel Valley.
Monterey Park has pretty much been my whole life.
Well, I'm proud to say that I was born and raised in the San Gabriel Valley.
We believe our diversity is what makes the SGV great. And no matter where you are from in the San Gabriel Valley, you will feel welcome. All right, SGVers, welcome back to another episode of the My SGV podcast. Thank you for tuning in. If you are new here, we bring you the stories of the people of the San Gabriel Valley. And if you are a returning listener, thank you so much for spending this time with us. We do appreciate it. Well, Victoria, I know Priscilla plays basketball, but do you play basketball?
No. Yeah, it was all Priscilla and the boys. And then our dad got them a basketball hoop in the driveway. So I would just play a little bit with them, just like trying to throw balls, I guess. Wasn't very good, but yeah, that's your
extent of basketball.
Yeah.
So I've talked quite a bit on this show about basketball, or my love for basketball. And actually, part of my friendship with Scott has been around basketball. Actually, I don't know if I shared this. I might have shared this. When I was going through that really difficult time in my life, he was still my client at that time. And he allowed me, or would do his sessions with me playing basketball. And we would play one-on-one twice a week, to 20 to 21, twos and threes. And you had to hit a three to win, or you went back to like 18. And like some games I would like probably score like 50 points before I would hit that three. and my goal was always to beat him 21-0. Like I was just like on him just because that's what I wanted to do. and he would beat me sometimes. He'd probably beat me like maybe 10% of the time. But yeah, probably I shared this on the show before, but before we started playing, Scott said that an NBA coach told him that he could play in the NBA. I was like, okay, either you're actually that good or you're a total liar, because it can only be one of those two things, right? And then after playing with him, like, he's older, and I played with him when he was older, but I can definitely see that. Yeah, for sure. So before we get to our guest, I want to thank Paris Baguette for sponsoring the delicious pastries today and every week for our guests. Go check them out in the city of San Gabriel on Las Tunas, and say hi to Jason for us. All right, let's get to today's guest. Today's guest is a true legend in the world of basketball and leadership. Hailing from Pasadena, she's been a dominant force on and off the court, making waves in both the basketball and culinary worlds. She's the executive chef and owner of Mainland Catering and the director and owner of Practice Makes Perfect Basketball Camp, a program that's been shaping young athletes in the San Gabriel Valley for 25 years. As co-head coach of the Flint Ridge Prep girls basketball team, her record speaks for itself. 261 wins, 2 CIF championships, and countless Coach of the Year honors. She's helped guide over 20 of her players to the college level and is even starring in an upcoming basketball documentary, Home Court, airing on PBS in March of 2025. She's a mentor, a mother of 3, a true community leader. Let's give it up for Coach Jayme Kiyomura Chan. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
That was quite the introduction. I was like, wow, who's that person?
Is that not you?
I guess so, but I never really think of myself in all those capacities at one time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'm excited because of the connection to, basketball and the things that I love. And when we first connected over Zoom, it was like, oh, we're just sort of figuring out all this.
Instantly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I'm really excited to get into that conversation, but let's first start with what is your connection to the San Gabriel Valley?
Yeah, so I was born at Huntington Memorial Hospital in 1977. We'll just throw out the age right there. And my mom and dad at the time were living in Eagle Rock. And a year after I was born, they bought their first home in Duarte. And I did not leave that street in Duarte except for 2 years until I was about 45 years old. So basically I was
like you never went anywhere?
Yeah, actually. So what happened was I grew up in Duarte Public Schools up until the 8th grade. Then I kind of went on vacation one summer with my mom, and when I came back, my dad told me, get dressed, get up, we're going to go buy your uniforms. And I was like, what are you talking about? There are no uniforms at Duarte High. And they're like, oh no, you're going to LaSalle in Pasadena. And I was like, quite literally was one of the first times I really explored outside of Duarte, was when I was in high school, and it was an all boys school. So I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, Dad. And he goes, no, we've enrolled you. They're going co-ed. You're going to go take, this entrance placement exam, and that's where you're going. And I was like, wow. So that was like kind of my experience now then in Pasadena, along with my experience with the Pasadena Bruins. But quite honestly, I hadn't been really doing much outside of Duarte since then. And then I kind of stayed local for college, so I was still at home in Duarte. And I got married, had an apartment by the San Gabriel Mission for a year and a half, 2 years, and then bought the house, had an opportunity to buy a house right next door to my house that I grew up in. So I was on Tannen Crest Drive for 40-something years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're definitely one of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Part of the SGV. What was life like growing up in Duarte? You are of mixed ethnicity, right?
I am. So my dad is Japanese. He was born in Japan, and he came with his 3 other brothers and his mom by way of, boat to the San Pedro harbor when he was 5. His youngest brother was 2. My third eldest son was 8, and my Uncle Tommy, who was oldest, was 12. And my bachan, my grandfather sent for them because they were in Japan. He was here. And they kind of just migrated to the Pasadena area. My grandfather was a gardener, landscaper, just like many Japanese families were at the time. My mom came from Culiacan, Sinaloa, and she came when she was 12. And at that time, divorce is very uncommon, especially in Mexico and Catholic marriages. And my grandmother and grandfather just decided that, it was time for them to kind of go separate ways. And so my grandma was like, I need to start over, and I need to take the youngest child with me because her siblings were quite a bit older and already being established into adulthood. So at 12 years old, my mom came with my grandmother. They were, I guess, not adopted, but sponsored by a cousin of my grandmother's. And they came over, and my mom kind of had to learn English. And yeah, then my mom and dad met at the old Eagle Rock bowling alley that doesn't exist anymore. My mom came after work with some of her girlfriends. My dad was working at the front table, and that's where they met. They were married for a long time, 30 years, and they are not married anymore. They're now both married to other people, but we are very much a blended family now. And growing up in Duarte was it was nice. Very, very small town at the time. Didn't have nearly the commerce that it does now. Our area up in the foothills is called Fish Canyon. Very quiet. We would play outside, like they said, until the streetlights came on, and then you would come inside. And both of my parents worked. Grandma was at home, one grandma or the other, at different parts of our lives. We were really raised by those grandparents. And when the grandparents kind of had to go off to help raise the cousins because we were getting older, that's when my mom had hired like full-time nannies, I guess you could say, where they would come on Sunday night and they would leave on Friday evenings when she got off of work. So we weren't necessarily like latchkey where no one was home, but there was definitely not a parent at home. So it was my brother and I'm about 4 years older, and we just kind of entertained ourselves outside. A lot of parks and rec, a lot of playing with the neighbors. As long as our homework was done, school was walking distance. It was really just a nice childhood, I would say.
Wow, so you got to spend a lot of time with your Japanese grandma and your Mexican grandma. How cool is that?
It is so cool. It's to the point where I can't identify one ethnicity is stronger than the other. Like it is, I'm depending on who I'm with, I'm totally immersed in that culture. So if I'm with my Japanese side, I'm just Japanese. And if I'm with my Mexican side, I tend to forget that I'm Japanese and I'm just Mexican. And I think it's pretty rare. Now that I talk to my other, friends who are half or mixed, a lot of them struggled with like identity or connection, or like there's a missing part of them. But because I had both of them, and neither one of them ever made me feel like less than for being Hapa or Hafu or however you want to, like, whatever name you want to give it. Like both of my grandparents got along very well. I think the biggest struggle was initially when my father had wanted to date a Mexican woman, because all of my uncles had dated or married Japanese women. So we're pretty much homogeneous in our family except for my brother and I. And now, obviously, our offsprings, we have a lot more diversity in, because, all the cousins have not married Japanese, but many have.
Mm. Yeah. I'm curious, does like speech change when you're around different ethnicities?
100%. I think I have some kind of multiple personality disorder. Like, I just morph into, and my husband says, Jimmy, you can't do that. You can't just go around saying that you could do this or do that because you're, you identify one way or the other. It's like the big joke. He's like, you can't just choose to be Mexican when you want to be Mexican, choose to be Japanese when you want to be Japanese. And I go, I'm sorry, I don't know any other way. Like, that is like truly who I am. But yeah, I guess, I don't know, I guess you could call it a bit of a chameleon. It's just the way I am. Like, and like when I speak Spanish, it's just I'm Mexican, and I just forget all of the little nuances that make me Japanese, all the polite kind of ways in which we engage and interact. When I'm interacting with my Mexican family, I'm much more just forward, and that's just because culturally that's the way we are. And then my husband's Chinese, so it's really interesting. My children are quarter half, and we try to just, as much as possible, immerse them in all of it. The one thing that's like pains me is that they don't have any other language that they're really comfortable with other than English. I mean, they have an ear for it, but like they really couldn't communicate in Japanese or in Spanish or in Chinese.
Yeah, that's tough.
It is so hard. And I know this is wrong of me, but I blame the grandparents. But then, at the same time, they all came when they were so young that they made it their life's goal to take on this American kind of culture, right? And so I only spoke Japanese or very basic Japanese because my grandma lived with me and I had to. Or I only spoke Spanish because my grandmother lived with me and I had to.
Yeah.
If it weren't for those two things, I wouldn't have been exposed.
How are you received by your friends? I don't imagine there's a large population of Japanese or Mexican in Duarte.
Probably in Duarte I haven't met anyone, but oddly enough, one of my best friends is half Japanese and half Mexican, and that happened later in life. And she's a twin, so I know two of them, and we are so strangely similar. And then I do know a couple of other people, but just amongst my friends, I think they just generally think I'm crazy. They are like,
doesn't matter if you're Japanese or Mexican or half, you're just crazy.
Just think like my Japanese friends, I think that they admire that I could be a little bit more direct with my thoughts, or, and they're always going, oh my gosh, Jayme, you're so crazy. And I'm like, no, I'm really not. Like, I just feel like, I don't know. I just try to pull the best out of both cultures and apply them to my life as best as I can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We started talking about basketball at the beginning of the show. When did that come into your life?
Oh my goodness. So very young. So very young. So because my dad was born and raised in Pasadena, initially when my bachan wasn't living with us, she was,
for the people who don't know what that
my
is.
grandma, my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, she lived off of Allen Street in Pasadena, and there was a little preschool on the corner by a liquor store called Firehouse Preschool, and it was close to what was Burbank Elementary. It's no longer, but anyways, so I was going to Burbank to the Firehouse School, and my grandma would pick me up every day, and then I'd kind of go back to her house, and we did that all the way through kindergarten. It was kind of like no after school thing for me to do. So my dad grew up at the Pasadena Buddhist Temple. At that time we used to call it PBC, Pasadena Buddhist Church, but now that it's PBT, Pasadena Buddhist Temple. And he played baseball there at the Japanese Cultural Center in Pasadena. He did judo, like a lot of just the community that surrounded him was through that. So he enrolled us pretty early in the Pasadena Bruins. I can remember I was probably 7 years old when we first started. Now we start kids at like some ridiculous age of like
2.
Seriously, like
here's your little plastic thing.
They come in pull-ups. They really do. But I was probably 7, and I mean, this was in the very early 80s. I mean, polyester was still like big. Like our uniforms were all like tackle twill and dazzle. And I remember one set of uniforms had velour or velvet numbers. And that's where I really fell in love with basketball. We joke that the Kiyomuras, the cousins, born of the 4 original boys, all 11 of us played basketball. Like there wasn't one cousin that didn't play basketball. And so it was just the thing that we did.
And to sort of break down what it means to play at the Pasadena Buddhist Church or Temple and with the Bruins, it's not like a sports rec league like for a city. It's specifically for Japanese children.
Right. So so we played in a league called JAO, Japanese American Optimists, and basically that's for the girls, and for the boys it's CYC, and it's specifically was created for the Japanese Americans to play in after the war, after people were relocated and they were allowed to go back to whatever was left of their communities and play basketball. And so what they were finding was that they would try to play at the YMCAs, or they would try to play at the parks, or whatever leagues were public leagues, and they were being shunned from those leagues. And so they had to create their own. So really that's where it came from. And they became so good and so dedicated at teaching the fundamentals that generations later, they have really created a league that feeds into these high school programs. The joke is if you have a few JA players on your team, you can be a successful team because you're going to have people who understand how to move the basketball. They're going to be able to dictate tempo and pace. They're going to be able to like have a pass first mentality. There's just so many things that we were taught. You know, some of these kids, when Lyle Honda had his SGV club, like dribbled the basketball for like 4 hours a day. I mean, they really became experts in using the giftedness that we have as Japanese Americans, you know, not looking at all of the things that we don't have, you know, and using our size, our as a strength, or our basketball IQ as a strength. So these Japanese leagues really became known for producing some pretty good talent.
Yeah. We had a Aikido master in here. I forget what level that was, but his name is Brian Tanaka. And he was describing the Japanese being forced to live in certain areas after the war. And he started to name them off. And he said in Pasadena and Hollywood and Gardena, San Fernando. And I was like, oh, that all sounds like those
for sure
Japanese basketball clubs.
Yeah. And the great thing about those leagues is you didn't have to be a member of the temple. Like, I come from like my family. My dad is Buddhist by tradition, culturally Buddhist. I say, you know, he doesn't go to worship, but it's just culturally what, you know, he was raised with. My mom, I would say, is culturally Catholic, coming from where she did in Mexico, and then my husband and I, we're Christian. So, like, the great thing is, it wasn't about religion. Like, the temple just opened its facilities because I think I know Brian Takeda, who you're talking about, right? I actually coached his daughter.
Did you really?
Yeah, Lauren. And Courtney and Lauren went to Flint Ridge Prep. So we go way back. But yeah, the beautiful part is the opening of the space. And for our Japanese leagues, we do allow non-Japanese to play, which is also, I think, really important because I feel like as people who were discriminated upon in the past, like, we really shouldn't also be so discriminatory. Like, I understand that the reason why the leagues also existed were because we needed a place to play. And sometimes, you know, you couldn't play higher levels of basketball if you weren't, you know, 5'10", or, you know, there are
height. There's a big height difference.
Yeah, there's a very big height difference, and only sometimes can that be overcome with talent. So I love that it exists for all people to play, you know, as long as they want. I mean, we have leagues that are over 50, you know, so I still play today. Like, I wouldn't really call it playing. We trot. And it's fun and it's communal. So, yeah.
Awesome. So basketball started for you at a very young age, and you got connected into this community that's been doing it for a very, very long time. And it sounds like you developed a passion for the sport at a young age. Where does your life sort of go after, let's say, high school?
Yeah, so I kind of had this dream of playing college basketball. And I say dream because not all dreams come true, right? Like, they're dreams for a reason, and aspirations and goals are wonderful to have, and you should always be working towards them. But in high school, I went to a school that was brand new to girls, so we only had one team. It was a varsity team. Luckily, we were really competitive. Were you
the best on that team?
I wouldn't say so because I was a freshman, and we did have sophomores, juniors admitted into LaSalle. Not very many of them, but we had like a 6'1" girl named Teresa who is a great athlete. Like, I got to play with people who are really pretty talented. But I would say like I was one of the better ones for sure. I would probably say I was one of the ones with the highest IQ. So that was a good experience for me. After graduating from LaSalle, the one thing that was hard for me is I had a lot of coaching changes throughout high school. So it was really difficult to develop a player-coach relationship or to understand how I could really enhance and benefit the program because the head of the program was constantly changing. So I always knew I wanted to go into coaching. In fact, I was already coaching before I had graduated for the Bruins. As soon as I got my driver's license on my birthday, my 16th birthday, I asked my dad, like, can I coach a team? And he's like, sure, if you want to. So I started my first team, and I was able to drive back and forth from Duarte to PBT to do our practices. So I knew I wanted to coach. My coach, my varsity coach, hired me back on as a JV coach at LaSalle for 1 year. And, you know, while it was amazing, it was a little bit difficult because as you can imagine, I was coaching some of my friends or my friends' siblings. And so at 18, they don't really want to be told what to do by one of their friends or what do you know? Like, you're just, you know, you've just graduated. And so, like, I did learn a lot there, but I knew that I had to probably step out to where nobody knew me. So then I applied to an opening that was in Laverne at Pasadena High School, and I coached there for a year. I was fortunate to have a JA player there who helped my team be really successful. We went 22-0
Wow.
that year. Yeah, and of course at that time I thought I knew everything. I just went 22-0. I had a better record than the varsity team, and I just thought, I'm going to apply for a varsity job. So I did. So I saw that there was, you know, at the time you had to go on job listings and look to see what's open. And I saw that there was an opening in Pasadena High School. I didn't know much about Pasadena High School other than the fact my dad went there. And so I was drawn to it because, you know, 2 of the uncles went to PHS, 2 of the uncles went to Muir, house divided. So I said, let me give it a shot. Let me at least go and interview. If I don't get the job, no big deal, but it'll be good for me to interview. Well, lo and behold, we went through like 3 rounds of interviews, and much to my disbelief, they hired me. The athletic director there, Gary Griffiths, just, I remember him saying like, wow, you're so young, but you came in here with a plan. And, you know, I went in there with tons of letters of recommendations, a practice plan, what I would do to, you know, support the team financially as far as fundraising, like what my vision for the team was. And I had no idea what I was walking into. Like, these were just things that all sounded great. Mind you, there was no like Google then, and there was no YouTube. It was just things I had picked up along the way. And so I started.
You're like 20?
I was, going to turn 21 that season. I was the youngest varsity coach in CIF at the time. I don't know about now, but at the time, I had girls that were 18 and 19 years old that I was coaching, like women. And I think it's fair to say that I learned more in those 4 years that I was at Pasadena High School about life, adolescence, what it means to be a role model, a mentor, what it means to be in a position of, like, not just authority, but in a position of, like, leading by example. Like, the way those girls, like, hung on to my every word, even though I was so young, was credit and kudos to them, because they were also looking for something. They were also looking for someone to come and speak into their life and walk with them. So I think a lot of it was, you know, timing. Obviously, I think it was like a divine appointment. I think I had as much to learn from that situation as they were learning from a hungry, eager, inexperienced head coach. Made crazy mistakes while I was there, but I was given a lot of grace by like my administration. I think they understood that those mistakes only came because I really wanted something good to happen. But, you know, in my immaturity, like one time I took the entire team hiking at Griffith Park.
Okay.
And it's something that we used to do all the time. We used to run up the hill as part of our conditioning because, you know, we were going to be the fastest, quickest trapping. We were going to just use all of that athleticism that we had, and we were going to just stifle people. But, you know, part of that was going to be, we were going to be mentally tough. And I thought, well, if we could run up this mountain, you know, for our conditioning, we were going to be mentally tough. Well, I got them all in my cars because you could do that. Then you just took kids in your cars and it was no big deal. And my assistant coach, Julia Mahara, and I, we packed them in and took them over to Glendale and ran up this hill, and 4 girls stepped in wasp nests that were in the ground. As we were running down the hill, thousands of wasps came out, and my girls, a lot of them, well, most of them, African American, had braids. And the way their hair was and the wings were of the wasps, they just stuck in their hair and were stinging them repetitively. It was a nightmare. Like, and looking back, I thought to myself, I wasn't really equipped to take those girls up the mountain. I didn't have a plan for, you know, first aid. Like, yeah, I was first aid certified at the time, but, you know, like, just things that I wouldn't do now as a head coach. Like, I thought, man, I could have really hurt somebody. Like, I felt so terrible. And the girls were just like so gracious, gave me a lot of grace. They were just like, Coach, this is not your fault. Like, you just wanted us to be better and challenge us and take us out of our comfort zone and allow us to do something that we never experienced. And I'm like, yeah, but in this moment, I was the adult, you know, and I was freaking out. And so anyway, so just little things like that really don't have much to do about basketball, more to do about life. I can't tell you how many crazy stories like that I experienced with them.
Was there ever a time in this period of your coaching that you thought maybe this isn't for you?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Especially when I was really young. And I wasn't really good at saying no to things. You know, like, I wanted, you know, to make sure that I was, you know, pleasing, like, everybody. And you just can't do that. Like, that's, you know, you don't want to have any haters. Like, you want to be seen in a particular way. And it was really hard. One of the reasons why I had so much growth at Pasadena is those girls challenged me on a daily basis, because sometimes I was mom, sometimes I was dad, sometimes I was coach, sometimes I was sister, you know, sometimes, you know, we wouldn't say this now, but I was like therapist. You know, I'm obviously not qualified and I don't have any degree to do so or anything like that. But to those girls, I was all of that. I mean, but the outside world, they had a lot of criticism. Like, who does she think she is? She's so young. What does she know? What does she know about our culture here in Pasadena, here at Pasadena High? She doesn't look like us. You know, those girls are towering over her. You know, like, was she trying to change them? Is she trying to make them, like, Asian? Because, you know, they only see the last name. They don't even realize that I'm also Hispanic. Or, you know, one parent at the time quite literally threatened me and said, if my daughter doesn't play, you know, I'll see you in the parking lot. And I had to have a restraining order. Yeah, so, like, there were times where I would go, why am I doing this again? Because, as you know, nobody coaches any high school sport for money. Like, this is, like, you've got to have a calling to do it, or you have to be dumb, or a little bit of both. And so I just grew so much in that time. I'm just so thankful for that time, as challenging as it was. It totally made me the coach I am today. And those girls, we just had a reunion like 5 years ago. They're married and have children, and some had children while I was coaching them. You know, others, I was in the labor and delivery room with them while they were birthing their children. We just have had so many moments together that, are pretty special.
Wow. In listening to you describe coaching these girls and women, I realized like I could never be that, even though like I could be a great coach, but to have a female coach, I think at that time in their life is needed and very special. When we talked, you mentioned empathy. I don't know where you read it that I put that, but you mentioned that and you said that was your strength as well. And I can see that as a young coach there, that you really called upon that to connect with these girls. And like, where did you develop that from? And how did you trust that that was what you needed to be a good coach? Because I know that's what you need, right? You need to be connected to your team, and everything else follows after that, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't have that skill, it doesn't matter how good a strategist you are. So where did you get that?
Well, I mean, I have, like, in my parents, you know, my mom especially, like, she didn't grow up with a lot. My dad didn't grow up with a lot either. I mean, there's a Japanese, like, family food dish. We call it okazu. It just means whatever's in the refrigerator, you throw together and you put it in a pan, and that's your dinner, like, right? Okazu can be anything. And so the running joke with my dad and his four brothers is like every night was okazu, like just rice and okazu, right? But like my mom also, like, she just moved around a lot, house to house. My grandmother cleaned houses, and whichever cousin or distant relative could watch over my mom, that's what she did. And, you know, as my mom and dad, both of them grew up, and they're just such hard workers. But not only that, they were always so generous with whatever resource we had, whether it be an extra bedroom or food or clothes we no longer fit in or anything. Like, nothing ever went to waste in our home. And I think that was really important for my brother and I to see, that you didn't have to have a lot to still, like, give, like, gracious, like, give with all your heart. Like, and it didn't matter, like, how much it was just the intention behind it. And so I think from a young age, I learned, like, that all the time. We were constantly taking stuff back to Mexico, like, whatever, like, because we would go, like, every year, because all the families here there except for my mom and my grandma, and we would just come back with whatever we were wearing. And at first we were just like, dude, Mom, do we have to give all our toys away? Or like, my brother and I weren't thrilled. But I think as we became older, we realized that none of that stuff really mattered. But to our friends and family, or to whoever they were gifting it to, not necessarily our immediate family, like, it meant a lot. So I think from a really young age, we learned how to be giving. And I just thought that's what everything that we have, not just our resources. Like, for me, my biggest resource is time. I have so little of it, but wherever I give my time, like, it's because I really value that. And so I just really saw value in, or see value in, these young ladies. Yeah.
You said earlier that it was hard for you to say no, and you wanted to people please. And when we spoke over our Zoom call, you had mentioned having to learn to say that. When did you realize that that was problematic in your life, to be a people pleaser, and how did you grow out of that?
Oh, I probably realized that pretty early on, but it took me a long time to grow out of. Yeah, I would say that I have only recently grown out of that. And I think I'm still working on it. because I think it's really easy to see people who say no as like selfish or conceited or standoffish. I think in the past I wouldn't see a person protecting themselves or they're like setting boundaries for themselves or their family. I would just see a person who was, I don't know, selfish maybe, or, and so I think it's taken me a long time to realize that maybe they were far ahead of me in setting boundaries. So it's only been, I think, the 30s were great. I learned a lot about myself. I learned how to say no a little bit more often, be a little bit more selective. But I can say now in my late 40s that I have pretty good boundaries set. My husband would say that I don't. He still thinks that I am outstretched. But I often say that like the projects that I'm taking on are projects that I deeply care about, that I don't want to say no to. And yeah, of course, I wish I had more time to say yes to more. And I wish I had the energy and the stamina to do what I did in the past. That's a evil, mean part of aging, right? Is just like, I just wish I had more hours in the day. But I don't. And so I think that boundary setting is super, super important, especially I have children and they need to know that they're my priority, because I think for a lot of years they probably thought mom prioritizes everybody equally, not more than us, but equally to us. And, mom guilt is real and dad guilt is real too, I'm sure. But those are some of the things that, like, unfortunately, I'll like take to the grave with me, that maybe I should have started doing that a little bit sooner so that my kids would never have to think that they were on the same level as anybody else.
Yeah. I don't know that I would like, I'm not taking on coaching clients, but when I'm coaching people, and maybe I've shared this with Victoria, I would say like, I want them to be this person, or at least have this ability when someone says, oh, can you go to dinner on Thursday? And you say no. Yeah. And they say, well, how why not? And I was like, because I don't want to. And I say it's kind of funny, right? And they're shocked.
Yeah.
It is kind of, it's meant to be funny, right?
Right.
But the truth is, like, unless you can say that, you're going to make excuses,
right,
or you're going to betray yourself, right?
Right.
So that's where I would like my family and stuff to be, with children, right? When we went to this whole like Zoom thing, and I was working a lot in Zoom in Canada, when my younger daughter would come in and we're like in a meeting, I would try to like, quiet her or get her off camera. And after a while, it's like, I'm never going to do that. And someone said that when they come in, they have to know that they're the most important thing. Yeah. Right. So now, like every morning, sorry if I could share this story. Every morning, my daughter would like very slowly, I could hear her like opening the door super slowly, because she wants to see if like she's going to bother me, right? So what I started doing was I would notice it, and then I would like come onto the floor and like just wait for her, and then she would come in. Aww. And so now it's this like little game, so she's trying to surprise me, but and then I just spend that time with her.
How old are your daughters?
7 and 11.
Oh, I love those ages.
Yeah.
Those are great ages because they're at the age of reason, right? So now you can reason with them, and they have so many of their own ideas, right? Yeah, that's a cool age. Yeah. So you sort of, gained a lot of knowledge, wisdom in Pasadena. Yeah, kind of just got thrown in there with the lions, but.
And you made a lot of money, right? Like 4 years coaching varsity.
Oh yeah, I think it was like $1,800 or something. Man, I should have invested that. If I would have let it roll over, we would have had like maybe like $9,000 by now.
Yeah. So no one does it for that, but so then why did you eventually leave Pasadena?
Oh well, I actually left because I was getting married, and my parents' marriage had just dissolved, actually, the year that I was getting married. So as I was coaching at Pasadena and kind of figuring out my own way, my parents and what I had known to be my truth my whole life was kind of falling apart around me. And so I left PHS after the 2002 season, and I was getting married that summer. And I knew that I wanted to start my marriage off on like a solid ground. And not that coaching at PHS wasn't going to allow me to do that, but I threw myself into coaching like fully. Like, so yeah, it's only a season, but it was all 12 months for these girls. Like, I just had to dedicate all of it to them. And so I knew that would take away from just starting our right foot in our marriage. So I did decide to do that. And then after we were married for, about a year, I was very bored. And I was never like resentful that I left, but I was just knew that I had to go back into coaching. And I had too much time on my hands. And it wasn't like just good for my overall mental health either. I mean, sure, dinner was ready and like all of the wifey things were ready, but I still had just a lot of time. And so I went to go coach at PCC. And I did that for quite a number of years, on and off in some capacity until we had kids. And then I kind of took like a leave. And then I received a phone call. I think Izzy was 5. The twins were 2. And I received a phone call from one of my PMP campers, my Practice Makes Perfect campers, longtime camper, grew up at my camp. And she called me crying. And she said, Coach Jayme, our season is about to start and we don't have a coach. And that's all I heard. But apparently there was more to what she said. She said, do you know anyone who's looking for a job? I didn't hear that part. I only heard and we don't have a coach. And then my brain was just like, hey, like me, like I'll do it, right? Well, my kids were young. They were in diapers. I had twins. There were 2. Izzy was in kindergarten. And I just thought to myself, like, I can't do this by myself. Like, I know how I am. I know what goes into, like, developing a program. I want to be competitive. I don't know anything about this school. I know it's going to be a lot of work. I have to call Kevin, my cousin. So of the 11 Kiyomura cousins at that time, Kevin's the oldest boy. I'm the oldest girl. And we've always wanted to coach together. Like, it was just another, dream of ours to coach basketball together. But he had never coached varsity ball because he was in his career. And he had 2 elementary school age girls as well. And I just go, let me call Kevin and see. Because he only lives 5 minutes away from the school. Maybe he'll consider it. And he worked like a schedule that could allow him kind of to do it. So I said, Kevin, hey, that school, up the street from you, they're looking for a coach. And he goes, Flintridge Prep? I'm like, yeah. He's like, I just went to their game last week. I was like, you did? Why? Like, I have never even been to their campus other than when we played against them when I was at LaSalle. I was like, they're like that snooty school up in the hills, like right up in La Cañada. And he goes, yeah, I'm training a Bruin kid. I'm training her and, trying to fix her shot. I'm like, you are? And I was like, okay, so how are they? And then he's like, they're not bad. They got some people who can play. And I was like, well, their coach just stepped down and they need a coach. Like, do you want to do it with me? And he was like, oh my God, Jayme. And he was thinking, how are we going to do this? We have 5 kids between us. Like, and I go, okay, you ask Carrie, your wife. I'll ask Phillip, my husband. And if they both say yes, which chances are they won't, but if they both say yes, then it's meant to be. So he asked Carrie and I asked Phillip, and they were both like, this is nuts, but if you really want to, and if the other person's going to do it, then okay, go ahead. So we submitted our application. We got letters of recommendations from everyone throughout the J community. My former bosses at at Pasadena, at PCC, and it was to the point where the AD at Flintridge Prep, who hired us, Alex Rivera, was like, picked up the phone and said, please stop having people send letters of recommendations. He's all, you're coming highly recommended. We know that. He's like, can you come in here for an interview? And Kevin and I went in there and they hired us on the spot, and 13 years later, we're still there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So
Thanks for sharing that story.
Double stroller and a kid doing kindergarten homework, on the bench. And that's how it's been.
Wow. You have to really love to coach to be able to go through that, because that's tough.
Well, and I knew that I couldn't do it alone. I would not be there still if I was trying to go at it alone. And I'm thankful for that kind of, vision, being visionary in that way, that intuition. Because one of the things that I promised myself is, as a varsity coach, I would never stay at a program for less than 4 years, because I never had coaches that were there for 4 years or more. I mean, granted, everyone has to start somewhere. So maybe my senior year coach was at LaSalle for 4 years. So that's awesome, right? But I wanted to always at least be able to see a class through. And that's really hard to do, because you just don't know where life is going to take you, right? So that's why I knew I needed Kevin, because the kids were so young and he was so much more local at the time, him being in Pasadena, myself being in Duarte. And also, as basketball's changing, it's getting much more progressive, and the way women's basketball has just taken off. Like, I knew that I needed someone who was a basketball mind to do this with me, and that's Kevin. Like, he has always been the greatest basketball mind that I've known. Like, sure, I've been to a lot of clinics and I've learned from so many others, but the one that's the closest to me is Kevin. And then we're yin and yang. So just as you were saying, like, you wouldn't be able to coach, maybe you'd be able to coach the X's and O's in basketball very well, but the other part of coaching girls, specifically teenage girls, that's the difficult part. And I knew Kevin had never experienced adolescent girls. And so that's where we complement each other. He handles, I would say, 99.9% of the X's and O's. I do all of the substitutions, and I do all of the team chemistry, team bonding, growth, leadership. Like, we do it together, but like, I initiate it, right? And then he supports me. And then he does all of the basketball kind of stuff. He initiates it and I support him.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a really cool dynamic.
And to work with your cousin.
Right.
Too.
And we really do work as one, because people ask us all the time, like, how does this co-head coach thing work? That's never going to work, because you guys are going to power trip, and we really don't care. We really don't care.
I think it was Ford who said, it's amazing what can be accomplished if you don't care who gets the credit.
Yep. Yeah.
Jayme, we ask each guest to bring an item of significance with them. What did you bring with you today?
Oh, this was so hard to bring, but so I have 2 CIF rings. I say that Kevin and I are very fortunate, because sometimes you can coach your whole career and not win a single one, and have had great teams, very deserving teams, and a bit of luck comes into play to win a CIF championship. But I have one ring that is more meaningful than the other. The first one's meaningful for obvious reasons, because it was the first, but the second one is this one right here that I brought. And so the reason why it's so meaningful to me is on the side of this ring right here, it says Coach Mom. I might get a little bit emotional. And it's because my daughter was on this team. And so actually my youngest daughter plays for me right now, but this is my oldest daughter at the time. And she captained this team with a player who's also very dear to my heart, Ashley Chia. And Izzy was not the best person on the team, not by far. Like, her senior year, she wasn't even a starter, so that goes to say a lot. And she was a 4-year varsity player, but she was the heart and soul of this team. She was just had infectious energy on the bench. She had infectious energy in practice, and I attribute a lot of our success to like what she did within our program with just very, very little recognition. And she never really wanted the recognition. She grew up in this program. Like her mom started when she was, 5 years old at this school, and she didn't care how much time she was going to get. All she wanted to do was be a part of the program, and she was going to leave her impact and her mark and her legacy in one way or another, and that's how she did it. And her co-captain was Ashley Chia, who was, probably one of the best players I've ever coached, besides Caitlin Chen, who's now playing at UConn. Yeah, and so it says Coach Mom on the side, and then inside my ring, my first ring inside has the initials of every single player who was on the team. So that's cool, because as I age, teams blur and the girls blur, and it's really nice that I'll always have their initials to remind me who they were. But on the inside of this ring, it just says COY, which is Coach of the Year, and then it says My Heart Izzy. So this is my CIF ring. Yeah.
That's really special. Thank you for bringing that in. As a person who has coached teams before, like for a young person, if you feel like you're not the best scorer, defender, rebounder, passer, that quality of bringing energy, oh my gosh, huge. Like coaches would like love to have you. Yeah. Love, because like you need that.
Yeah. I think it's so important as players to know your role. Know your role and embrace that role, because there's only one basketball. Only one person can score at a time. We're only defending one basketball. We're only shooting one basketball. There's only 5 players on the floor at one time, and I might have 13 on the roster. Knowing your role is huge. Some things coaches can't live without. A lockdown defender, a person who's a Dennis Rodman who's going to clean up the boards, a scorer, someone can handle the basketball, right? And like people like Izzy, who are willing to do whatever it takes to fill in those missing gaps, right? And so like I think everybody wants the glory of checking the stat book at the end, but honestly, I've had so many great scorers in my time of coaching, and they just blur sometimes. But I can always tell you who is my best rebounder, my grittiest player, my hustle player, my floor general, like my most unselfish player, who'd find the open man. Like those things are so important. And then know your rank, right?
Yeah.
Like have you earned it, right? So there's so much to be said about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to get into the documentary that's going to come out and that I actually got a chance to watch.
Good.
So let's take a break, and we'll be right back.
Sounds good.
Sometimes, even the best of us can slip up. That's why the law offices of Scott Wormuth are here to pick you back up again.
And while they strive to get you the biggest compensation possible, oh my gosh.
Their main concern is your health and recovery. They work closely with doctors and insurance companies to make sure you get the proper medical treatment.
Initial consultations are free, so give them a call.
At the law offices of Scott Wormuth, we're with you all the way.
I'm Scott Wormuth. We've been fighting for your rights for more than 40 years.
All right, we're back with Jayme. Jayme, before the break, you were sharing the story of your rings and your daughter's contribution to the team. Before we get into the documentary, when we come back from break, we like to ask questions from this deck of cards called Icebreakers, and they're just a little fun way for the audience to get to know us a little bit better. So Victoria and I will also participate in this. So the question is, what's the first concert you ever went to? Victoria?
I think my first one was a Michael W. Smith Christmas concert. It was in a concert hall. I don't remember where exactly. I know it wasn't downtown or like the Walt Disney Concert Hall. That was later years. But yeah, it was a Christmas concert at Michael W. Smith. I was pretty young. Family, mom and dad took us, just the girls.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I have only been to one concert in my life. Ever. Like, it just wasn't a thing for me, right? And so I think I went in 2007 or 9, and it was the Killers at Staples Center. And I remember, like, I was like, wow, this is taking a very long time for them to come out. I think it took like 3 hours for them to come out. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. But yeah, that was my very first concert, my only concert, and my last concert that I ever went to.
Well, to your point, I think my children have been to more concerts than I have in my lifetime, because we might have had a similar experience. Like, as a young adult, I didn't really go to many, and I don't know if that's because I couldn't afford it or what, but I do remember going to 92.3 The Beat, Summer Jams.
Is that Theo?
Theo! Okay, side story about that later. I'll have to tell you. So yeah, I went to those on the lawn, and I remember my first experience being contact high, because that's also something I was very unfamiliar with, and I went home with like awful nausea and headache.
Wow.
And I remember I didn't really like that experience.
Wow, I haven't thought of Theo in years.
You haven't?
No, I forgot about that. But yeah, it's like such like a really deep
sultry.
voice.
He's Japanese, you know.
Yeah, Mizuhara is his last name, right?
Yeah, I had a. I don't know. I'll tell you later.
You had a crush on him?
No, I didn't. I did not. But I'll have to. Yeah, I'll just tell you later.
I thought it was black.
I think everyone thought he was. Everyone. We thought it was Brian McKnight.
Yeah. But that's funny. Well, if you're watching or if you're listening, let us know what's the first concert you ever went to. Well, Jayme, I got the opportunity to watch this, and thank you for sharing. Like, you know, I got a special preview of it, you know, before it's even released, and I made sure that I would just want to dedicate, like, I'm just going to watch it. I'm not going to be doing anything else, not even eating, or just having it in the background. I want to really watch it, right? So, it was really interesting to see just the life, right, of player and coach, and what that's like, and the ups and downs of a season. And well, what was your experience of actually being in it?
Yeah. So never in my wildest dreams did I think that I was going to be the subject of a documentary, ever. And sometimes, like, looking back at it, I can't believe it happened. And many times during the process, I would forget that we were filming. Not obviously when the cameras were there, but in between, we just go about our regular life. So I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that it was a documentary, and so it was just truly, what was happening. So the way it happened was Erica Tanamachi, she's a filmmaker from NorCal, got a grant from, I don't want to botch this, but I believe it's called CAM, to do a film on the Japanese American basketball experience. Because during COVID, I think PBS aired a docuseries about the Chinese immigrants that came to work on the railroads. And so it got a lot of feedback, and people were really interested in more kind of AAPI films. So she got a grant to do this film, and then through her cousin-in-law, Jayme Hagia, who I coached, and she went on to play at USC and actually try out for the Los Angeles Sparks. Jayme had given her several names of people in the community who might have more information about JAY basketball. So when they called me, they were just calling me to ask me what I knew about it and who I could kind of reference them to and put them in connection with. So I did that. And then she kind of said, well, what's your story? I'm like, I'm just a high school basketball coach. There's really no story here. I have a few, 5 or 6 girls within my program who play J-ball. And, these are some of them. Not all of them are Japanese. I have a Cambodian American girl now, and I have a half Chinese, half Caucasian girl who plays. A lot of them are half Japanese, half Chinese. I was kind of explaining. And she said, okay, great, thanks. And we left it at that. And 2 weeks later, they called me back and they go, that store, that girl you were telling us about, the Cambodian American girl. And I was like, yeah, Ashley. She's like, we want to do a documentary on you guys and your team and your relationship. And I was like, why? Like, it's not going to be interesting. Like, don't you want people to be interested in what? And she's like, no, like, I think it's really fascinating. And of course, I'm not a storyteller and I'm not a creative like that. So up until the final cut, I still didn't understand why she wanted to film us. It wasn't until I saw the final cut that I was just like, whoa, like you got all of that out of the last 4 years. It was 4 years, 3.5 to 4 years. It was a very, very long time. I mean, you really watch Ashley grow up in this film, like from just a very young teen to a girl going off to college. So it was like her whole high school life captured on film.
I was really struck by how challenging moments in her life that she was experiencing and how it expressed, and then empathizing with her, right? That she had some real challenges, and then to see you come alongside her and meet her where she's at, and not try to like say you need to be different or something's wrong with you, or that was like the thing that really struck me about watching that, and how and then you could see this progression of who she is throughout the film, and it takes a special person to be able to handle that, because like that was a lot of energy there, right? A lot of energy with her, and that impacts the team, right? And coming from your star player too, like that's a lot to handle.
Yeah.
And so I really, really enjoyed it, and I thought it was done really, really well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think so too, because I was really hesitant to sign a contract to do this for so many reasons, but really for Ashley, because she was so young, and the ramifications on what was perceived of her were going to be huge. And I knew that Ashley's parents didn't know what we were getting into, no matter how many translators were there or how it was explained, or and I knew Ashley didn't know either, because I didn't know. Like, we hired lawyers to, like, actually it was of my best friend's sister-in-law who looked over the contract, because she's an entertainment lawyer, and did me a huge favor, because it was like reading Chinese. Like, honestly, I didn't understand any of it. And my husband was just, he's so protective over our family. He was like, really don't want to do this, Jayme. Every film has a villain. You're going to be the villain. They got to make a story out of something. And I'm like, I can't villainize something if it's not there, though. And so, they made sure to write it in the contract that I would be able to, like, have some control and see where they were going with the story, obviously, because it's just so important to me that Ashley's life would be okay after all of this. But to your point, like, for Ashley, like, she just needed someone who was going to be there for her, and I don't think that not just anyone could understand what she was going through. And I think a lot of, like, my life and what I had experienced growing up with, parents that immigrated here, was so similar, like, culturally a little bit different, because, I would consider Cambodia pretty, like, third world or developing still. And, people don't see Japan that way. They see it as a very developed nation, and even Mexico, more developed. But her parents are just great, hardworking, loving, first-generation folks. And as a niece myself, like, I just knew that it was going to be hard for Ashley to assimilate, especially at Flint Ridge Prep. But I knew that if we could get her to just fully immerse herself there and take advantage of all of the amazing things that our school could offer her, that it would change her life, her little brother's life, her parents' life, and generations to come with just that one child.
Yeah, that moment in the film really struck me when you were recalling how you approached the school to bring her, and nothing about it was about basketball.
Right. Well, I almost got fired, and, I can chuckle about it now, but, Flourish Prep is a very academically rigorous school. It's very expensive. The tuition is crazy. They're also very generous. They have an endowment from very generous people, and they do have financial aid, but it's not merit-based. It's only need-based, right? And so I knew that there was a child with a need, and I knew she could academically cut it, right? And so we have a waiting list of hundreds of kids. 600 kids apply for 50 spots. It's the percentage to get in is harder than to get in at any Ivy League school. And so I knew I was, going to face some pushback, but I also knew that if I didn't try, that I wouldn't be able to live with myself. If she didn't get in and I went down trying and swinging and she just didn't get in, then I could say I gave it my best shot. But I had to try in order to do that. So it went so far as the headmaster at the time calling me into this office and saying this is not how we go about things here. Because I was having people, again, write recommendations, people who I knew that were on the board, try to work their angles. And he was just feeling heat. But they had already chosen the class. And so the best they could do was tell me that she was at the top of the waiting list. And I was crushed, but at the same time hopeful. Because top of the waiting list doesn't mean no, right? So you didn't give me a no. They would have been better off to say no to me than I would have been okay. Because I am a rule follower. Once I'm told no, okay. But until I get a firm no, not a maybe no, I'm going to push. And so Ashley enrolled at LaSalle, which I said, that's fantastic. That's a school I went to. That's great. I'm so glad that you're going to get a great education. It's a great school. They have a great program. I'm fond of their coach. And she was in orientation when I got the phone call from our admissions director that a space became available for her 2 days before the start of school.
Wow.
She had already paid registration fees at LaSalle for her family. That was huge. A $1,200 registration fee that they weren't going to get back was huge. They had bought uniforms already, and when I gave her dad the call, I said, I'm just calling you to let you know, not because I expect you to pull her from LaSalle. I just want you to know, and I just want Ashley to know, because of your faithfulness to me and your commitment to me and hanging in there in this process, which was so hard for you, because every day I just said, have faith, have faith, have faith. I'm praying about this, have faith. I know there's going to be an answer to this prayer, have faith. And they're just going lady, you crazy. I just want you to know she got in. We did it. She got in. And I don't expect her to come. I fully expect her to go to LaSalle. But when she gets home from school today, will you tell her that, she got in, and she can always know that she was good enough and she got in. So he called her, I guess, on her cell phone or texted her. And she called me 20 minutes later and said, my dad's coming to get me right now. We're going to prep to go fill out the paperwork. And I was just wow. And it was just, that was the beginning of that relationship.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
What a story.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Jayme, we're going to have to move on to the final segment of the show.
Yeah.
And so we're going to learn about what you like in the San Gabriel Valley.
Oh.
So, Jayme, this is the SGV3. This is the part you've been dreading or waiting for the whole show. This is where we get to learn your favorite.
Unfair. There's so many awesome things about the SGV.
It is,
but,
yeah.
Okay, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
What's your first one?
The first one is less than a mile away. Right up the street on the left-hand side, across the street from Gabrielino, is my home church. It's Mission Valley Free Methodist Church under the leadership of Pastor Dave Fukuyama. And I've probably been a member of that church for, 30 years. It's not necessarily close to home. And so it was a very conscious decision that we had to make, that we were going to be really faithful about, making that commute. And I think during my young motherhood times, they really fed and supported and just nourished me in all those kinds of ways that I needed when I had, 3 kids in diapers at one time. So that would be number 1. Number 2 is City of Hope. And that's because my mom is a breast cancer survivor, treated at City of Hope, and my best friend from middle school, diagnosed with leukemia in her 20s, also a survivor, actually was treated at City of Hope, and she spent quite a lot of time there. I think one time she was there for 2 or 3 months and was a live-in patient there. So I'm just so thankful for the work that they do at City of Hope, and I think we forget that they're there. I know I do. I only think of them when, someone says the C word, right? And then lastly is I have to give a shout out to Pasadena High School, because specifically Gary Griffiths, because he took a chance on a young girl who really had no idea what she was doing and saw something in me that I don't even think I saw in myself. And really, I think had I gotten to know that day, life would have been so much different in so many ways. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's a rare thing that all 3 SGV3s are brand new, but you you got it. I'm actually surprised no one else has said City of Hope, because that's a big part of the SGV, and we actually included them in our either intro or outro now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, you'll see that. So thank you for sharing those.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing your story with us. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so my Instagram is private. However, I do have some public ones, and PMP camp, PMP basketball camp is one of them, and the other one would be Mainland Catering. You can follow us also at FP Girls Basketball. That's probably the most active of the 3 accounts, just because we really try in this wonderful world of social media to do our due diligence, because these girls are so on top of their kind of social media profile in life, way more so than I am. I mean, I didn't even have a cell phone when I was in high school. So those are really the 3 areas.
When is your camp held?
So PMP is traditionally held in July. It used to be held in August, but with schools going back so early now, we host them at mid to the end of July. We try to stay away from Dodger Tournament, which is a big Japanese tournament, and they go all the way out to Vegas. And so a lot of kids will use PMP in preparation for tournament season. Yeah, and we just celebrated our 25th year, which is absolutely bonkers, because we have PMP. I have PMP grandbabies now. The kids of my former campers are starting to come to camp, and it's really a cool thing.
Wow, that is cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
Well, Jayme, thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Thank you so
and
much
sharing
for
your story.
having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
There you go, another episode in the books. I really enjoyed this episode, as I'm sure you can sort of hear in my voice and maybe see in my face. Here you got this in-depth look of Coach Jayme's journey, and you see there's very little about basketball and strategy, and so much about her desire to connect, and even the things that mattered to her were along those same lines, right? People who believed in her or saw something in her, and now she's doing that with her own team, her own children, and making her own impact here in the San Gabriel Valley. So thank you for sharing that with us. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing. Don't forget to like and share. And if you want to see the full catalog of episodes, check out our website, mysgv.net. We have a shop there where you can check out our merch. And I write a weekly newsletter that you can subscribe to. I write it personally and just share stories from the SGV and my own personal life. So please check those out. If you want to support the show in a more meaningful way, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon under MySGV Podcast. And until next week, we'll see you then. Thank you for joining us on the MySGV Podcast. Check out more of our content on our website, mysgv.net. This show was produced by Scott Wormuth, directed by Russell Mano, edited by Victoria Allers, and original music by Yone OG. If you'd like to join us next week as we capture and share more stories from our diverse community, feel welcome.
Nice mother. No, kind of mother.